Robert Gabriel Mugabe is the current President of Zimbabwe, serving since the 22nd of December 1987. As one of the leaders of the rebel groups in opposition to white minority rule, he was elected Prime Minister in 1980, serving in that office as head of the government until 1987, when he became the country's first executive head of state. He has led the Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front since 1975. Mugabe rose to prominence in the 1960s as the leader of the Zimbabwe African National Union during the conflict against the conservative, white minority government of Rhodesia. Mugabe was a political prisoner in Rhodesia for more than 10 years between 1964 and 1974. Upon release, Mugabe, along with Edgar Tekere, immediately left Rhodesia with the assistance of Brigade in 1975 to launch the fight during the Rhodesian Bush War from bases in Mozambique. At the end of the war in 1979, Mugabe emerged as a hero in the minds of many Africans. He won the general elections of 1980 after calling for reconciliation between the former belligerents, including white Zimbabweans and rival political parties, and thereby became Prime Minister on Zimbabwe's independence in April 1980. Soon after independence, Mugabe set about creating as an UPF-run one-party state, establishing a North Korean-trained security force, the 5th Brigade, in August 1981 to deal with internal dissidents. Mugabe attacked former allies state.He, in which the 5th Brigade crushed an armed rebellion by fighters loyal to his rival Joshua Nkomo, leader of the minority Ndebele tribe, in the province of Matabeleland. Between 1982 and 1985, at least 20,000 people died in ethnic cleansing and were buried in mass graves. Mugabe consolidated his power in December 1987, when he was declared executive president by parliament, combining the roles of head of state, head of government, and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, with powers to dissolve parliament and declare martial law. In 2008, Mugabe suffered narrow defeat in the first round of a presidential election, but he subsequently won the runoff election in a landslide after his opponent in Morgan Tsvangirai withdrew. Mugabe then entered a power-sharing deal with Tsvangirai as well as Arthur Mutambara of the MDCT and MDCM opposition party. In 2013, the Election Commission said Mugabe won his 7th term as president, defeating Tsvangirai with 61% of the vote in a disputed election in which there were numerous accounts of electoral fraud. Mugabe was elected as the chairperson of the African Union on the 30th of January 2015. He had previously led the AU's predecessor, the Organization of African Unity, in 1997–98. Early life. Childhood. Robert Gabriel Mugabe was born near the Kutama Jesuit mission in the Zavimba district, northwest of Salisbury, in southern Rhodesia, to a Malawian father, Gabriel Matabele, and a Shona mother, Ona, a daughter, Chief Gutu of the Karanga tribe and Gumbo Muchupa Masvingo province. Both parents were Roman Catholic. He was the third of 6 children. He had 2 elder brothers, Michael and Raphael. Both his elder brothers died when he was young, leaving Robert and his younger brother, Donato, and 2 younger sisters, Sabina and Bridget. His father, a carpenter, abandoned the family in 1934 after Michael died, in search of work in Bulawayo, St. Francis Xavier's Kutama College, and Fort Hare. Mugabe was raised as a Roman Catholic, studying in Marist Brothers and Jesuit schools, including the exclusive Kutama College, headed by an Irish priest, Father Jerome O'Hay, who took him under his wing. Through his youth, Mugabe was never socially popular nor physically active and spent most of his time with the priests and his mother when he was not reading in the school's libraries. He was described as never playing with other children but enjoying his own company. According to his brother Donato, his only friends were his books. He qualified as a teacher but left to study at Fort-Hare in South Africa, graduating in 1951, while meeting contemporaries such as Julius Nyerere, Herbert Kitpo, Robert Sobukwe and Kenneth Kaunda. He then studied at Salisbury, Gwelo, and Tanzania, originally graduating with a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Fort-Hare in 1951. Mugabe subsequently earned 6 further degrees through distance learning, including a Bachelor of Administration and Bachelor of Education from the University of South Africa and a Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Laws, Master of Science, and Master of Laws, all from the University of London External Programme. The 2 law degrees were earned while he was in prison, the Master of Science degree earned during his premiership of Zimbabwe, teaching in Zambia and Ghana. After graduating, Mugabe lectured at Chalambana Teacher Training College in northern Rhodesia from 1955 to 58. Thereafter, he taught at Apua Secondary School at Takoradi, in the western region of Ghana, after completing his local certification at Achimota School, where he met Sally Hayfrin, whom he married in April 1961. During his stay in Ghana, he was influenced and inspired by Ghana's then Prime Minister, Kwame Nkrumah. In addition, Mugabe and some of his Zimbabwe African National Union party cadres received instruction at the Kwame Nkrumah Ideological Institute, then at Winneba in southern Ghana. Revolutionary activity. Early political career. 1960 to 63, Mugabe returned to southern Rhodesia and joined the National Democratic Party in 1960. After the administration of Prime Minister Edgar Whitehead banned the NDP in September 1961, it almost immediately reformed as the Zimbabwe African People's Union, led by Joshua Nkomo. Mugabe left ZAPU in 1963 to join the breakaway Zimbabwe African National Union, which had been formed by the Reverend Ndabaningi Sithole, Edgar Tekere Edson Zavabgo, Enos Gala and lawyer Herbert Kitpo. ZANU was influenced by the Africanist ideas of the Pan-Africanist Congress in South Africa and influenced by Maoism, while ZAPU was an ally of the African National Congress and was a supporter of a more orthodox pro-Soviet line on national liberation. Similar divisions can also be seen in the independence movement in Angola between the MPLA and UNITA. It would have been easy for the party to split along tribal lines between the Ndebele and Mugabe's own Shona tribe, but cross-tribal representation was maintained by his partners. ZANU leader Sithole nominated Robert Mugabe as his Secretary-General. During early 1964, tension between the two rival nationalist parties boiled over into violent conflict within the black townships. Many people were killed as rival former colleagues turned against each other. Wright David Martin and Phyllis Johnson. Homes and stores were burned and looted. The government reacted by arresting political agitators for criminal offenses and jailing Nkomo in Gonak Ujingwa restriction camp, a remote detention unit in the southeast of the country, after members of ZANU murdered a farmer, Petrus Oberholzer, on 4 July 1964. ZANU and ZAPU were officially banned on 26 August 1964. The leaders, including Mugabe, were shortly arrested and imprisoned indefinitely. indefinitely. ZAPU figures joined Nkomo at Konakujingwa, while the leaders of ZANU were briefly held in turn at two similar units near Gwelo, first Wawa, then, for the 15th of June 1965, Sikombela, before being transferred permanently to Salisbury Prison on the 8th of November 1965. Mugabe earned numerous further degrees by correspondence courses while detained, including 3 from the University of London, degrees in law and economics respectively, and a Bachelor of Administration. When his 3-year-old son Nomodsenyika died from malaria in Ghana in late 1966, Mugabe petitioned the prison governor to leave on parole to attend the funeral in Accra, the Ghanaian capital. The Prime Minister Ian Smith intervened personally to prevent this ascendancy to ZANU leadership. In 1974, while still incarcerated, Mugabe was elected, with the powerful influence of Edgar Tekere, to take over the reins of ZANU after a no-confidence vote was passed on Ndabaningi Sithole. Mugabe himself abstained from voting. His time in prison burnished his reputation and helped his cause. Following a South African détente initiative, Mugabe was released from prison in December 1974 along with other nationalist leaders, and having initially traveled to Zambia, where he was ignored by Kenneth Kaunda, returned, then left once again in April 1975 for Mozambique, assisted by a Dominican nun, where he was later placed in temporary protective custody by President Samora Machel. According to Eddie Cross, who participated in interviews of the leadership at the time to determine the views on the longer-term future, Mugabe's political viewpoint was that a new, progressive society could not be constructed on the foundations of the past, that they would have to destroy most of what had been built up after 1900 before a new society, based on subsistence and peasant values, could be constructed. Mugabe unilaterally assumed control of ZANU after the death of Herbert Kaipo on 18 March 1975. Later that year, after squabbling with Ndabaningi Sithole, Mugabe formed a militant ZANU faction, leaving Sithole to lead the moderate ZANU party. Many opposition leaders mysteriously died during this time. Additionally, an opposing newspaper's printing press was bombed and its journalists tortured. Lancaster House Agreement, 1979–1979. Under pressure from Henry Kissinger, South African Prime Minister B.J. Vorster persuaded his Rhodesian counterpart Ian Smith to accept in principle that white minority rule could not continue indefinitely. On 3 March 1978, Bishop Abel Muzorewa, Ndabaningi Sithole and other moderate leaders signed an agreement at the Governor's Lodge in Salisbury, which paved the way for an interim power-sharing government, in preparation for elections. The elections were won by the United African National Council under Bishop Abel Muzorewa, but international recognition did not follow and sanctions were not lifted. The two Patriotic Front groups under Mugabe and Joshua Nkomo refused to participate and continued the war. The incoming government did accept an invitation to talks at Lancaster House in September 1979. A ceasefire was negotiated for the talks, which were attended by Smith, Mugabe, Nkomo, Zavabgo and others. Eventually the parties to the talks agreed on a new constitution for a new Republic of Zimbabwe with elections in February 1980. The Lancaster Agreement saw Mugabe make two important and contentious concessions. First, he allowed 20 seats to be reserved for whites in the new parliament, and second, he agreed to a 10-year moratorium on constitutional amendments. His return to Zimbabwe in December 1979, following the completion of the Lancaster House Agreement, was greeted with enormous supportive crowds. Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, 1980 to 1987. After a campaign marked by intimidation from all sides, mistrust from security forces, and reports of full ballot boxes found on the road, the Shona majority was decisive in electing Mugabe to head the first government as Prime Minister on 4 March 1980. ZANU won 57 out of 80 common roll seats in the new parliament, with the 20 white seats all going to the Rhodesian Front. Mugabe, whose political support came from his Shona-speaking homeland in the north, attempted to build Zimbabwe on a basis of an uneasy coalition with his ZAPU rivals, whose support came from the Ndebele-speaking south, and with the white minority. Mugabe sought to incorporate ZAPU into his ZANU-led government and ZAPU's military wing into the army. ZAPU's leader, Joshua Nkomo, was given a series of cabinet positions in Mugabe's government. However, Mugabe was torn between this objective and pressures to meet the expectations of his own ZANU followers for a faster pace of social change. In 1983, Mugabe fired Nkomo from his cabinet, triggering bitter fighting between ZAPU supporters in the Ndebele-speaking region of the country and the ruling ZANU. Mugabe accused the Ndebele tribe of plotting to overthrow him after sacking Nkomo. Between 1982 and 1985, the military crushed armed resistance from Ndebele groups in the provinces of Matabeleland and the Midlands, leaving Mugabe's rule secure. Mugabe has been accused by the BBC's Panorama program of committing mass murder during this period of his rule, after the show investigated claims made by political activist Gary Jones that Mugabe had been instrumental in removing him and his family from his farmland. A peace accord was negotiated in 1987. ZAPU merged into the Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front on the 22nd of December 1988. Mugabe brought Nkomo into the government once again as a vice president. Gukurahundi Mugabe planned to reorient the people of Matabeleland and Midlands after he failed to win any seats there. Mugabe had been friends with Julius Nyerere, who had convinced him that the most effective way to progress post-colonial Africa was to embark on one-party politics. To him, democracy was a detraction that colonialists would use to destabilize newly independent countries. In 1982, Mugabe pretended to discover old Russian trucks and weapons held in ZAPU farms for disposal. The weapons were known to the government and were beyond use after having been used in the Angola War. He used this as an excuse to instigate a genocide in Matabeleland, resulting in over 20,000 deaths among the civilian population. The fact that there was no evidence for a planned ZAPU-led conflict was accepted by Zimbabwean courts, which acquitted Dumiso Dabengwa and General Lookout Masuku, supporting the claim of prior planning for crushing the people of Matabeleland and Midlands for standing in the way of his one-party state ambition. Is the fact that his North Korean army training agreement was signed in June 1980, long before any arms were allegedly found. Additionally, the 5th Brigade was never training in military tactics, such as defending a territory or mounting an offensive. They were training in civilian population military tactics. Mugabe himself noted that it was deployed to reorient the people, not to fight any dissidents. According to a report by the Catholic Commission for Justice and Peace in Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe's 5th Brigade killed between 10,000 and 20,000 people. The report also notes that about 2,000 of these people were killed within the first week of deployment.